Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you. As a part of Ministry of External Affairs India at the rate 75 Videsh Niti Distinguished Lecture Series, today's lecture will be delivered by a very notable speaker and the Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee ma'am on the India and the G20 presidency, its priorities and the challenges, with a special focus on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. As India will be assuming the presidency of G20 on 1st December 2022, the talk will be quite interesting and informative. We are extremely honored and privileged to have with us such an esteemed guest at IIT Hyderabad. She is someone whose journey has been very inspirational and illustrious at the same time. Please give a huge round of applause to the Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee. Now let us welcome our Honorable Dean International Relations, Tarun Kanti Panda sir.
So thank you for coming. So this is also the first opportunity that we are honor to Ambassador Mukherjee at the IIT Hyderabad the first time. So we are really looking forward to her talk, and she has a vast experience in different countries as ambassadors, and so also we would like to learn a little bit more about foreign policy, about India and how she works in different countries. So I think with this brief statements or these words, I would like to invite. Okay, introduce. So I would like to ask her to introduce about her. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce the Ambassador Mukherjee ma'am. She is widely regarded as the foremost expert in the foreign affairs and the foreign policies. She has earned the bachelor's degree in the history from the Mirinda College and a master's degree in the history from the Delhi University, and earned a degree in French language and the civilization from the University of Sorbonne in Paris. She has joined the Indian Foreign Services in 1976 and has distinguished herself in multiple roles as a diplomat. She was the ambassador of India to the Netherlands during the 31st July 2010 to the 30th June 2013. She was the permanent representative of India to UNESCO Paris from 20th September 2004 to 30th June 2010. She also delivers the lectures at the Sushma Swaraj Foreign Service Institute and the universities in India and abroad, which include the topic like India's culture and the civilization heritage. She inscribed the Endangered Labour Route project for UNESCO and the government of Mauritius on the World Heritage List. She was the senior consultant to the Department for the International Development and a senior consultant to the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development, UNESCO. She is a bestseller author, sailing author, and a TV commentator. She is presently authoring the Endangered and its root, a relentless quest for the identity for the Rupa publication. Please put our hands together to extend a special welcome to our guest, Honorable Ambassador, ma'am. Now I cordially invite the Honorable Speaker, ma'am, to start her talk.
Thank you very much for that very nice introduction, which I probably don't deserve. And maybe the first thing I should teach myself next is how to fix a mic on my sari blouse and sari. So if you can't hear me, please shout and I'll raise my voice. It's great to be here in Hyderabad. My last visit to Hyderabad was before Dr. Panda was born, I think, possibly. Because I was sent here in 1977 on a train from Delhi to Hyderabad for our foreign service training. It was called the Indian Institute of Community Development in the middle of March. I spent 6 weeks in Hyderabad. There were frequent power cuts. There was no AC and no cooler. But we enjoyed the watermelon and the biryani. So I guess it was worth it. It's very nice to be back. Thank you very much. The topic of today's lecture, which is India and the G20 presidency, challenges and priorities, with special focus on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, is intended to bring to you a sense of where India stands in an extremely complex and complicated world situation. In that context, it's good that we now have specialized courses in engineering or medicine where these kind of lectures are introduced to the students so that the earlier uni focus of engineers, doctors, nuclear physicists, etc., is now extended because you can see the world from a multipolar perspective rather than a unipolar perspective. As far as the G20 is concerned, I'm sure many of you may have read or Googled about it, but what is important for all of you to remember is that the present, I think there's some problem here in the first row, or? Achha, I think you need to change your seats and go to the other place. Okay, thank you. The present world structure, which is the United Nations, the Bretton Woods institutions, the Security Council with its 5 permanent members, they reflect a power structure after World War II. In other words, where those who were victorious, including India's colonizer, the United Kingdom, got a permanent seat in the Security Council, and that power structure has continued till today, even though everything in the world has changed, including the position of United Kingdom in the world, where the Indian economy overtook the UK, and where actually the UK is facing recession like the rest of the European Union. Under those circumstances, the new organizations which have come up, which includes, for instance, the Quad, where India is a member, the G20, where India is going to become president from 1st of December, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where India has taken over chairmanship. These are new organizations which reflect the actual power structure until we finally succeed in getting the United Nations and the Security Council amended. What does the G20 do? The G20 actually consists of the 20 leading economies in the world. And therefore, why is it also important for Ukraine, Russia? It's because it includes Russia, it includes US, it includes all the major Western countries, all of whom have embarked on an extremely foolish policy, in my perspective, of trying to destroy Russia economically and politically, not understanding that it would then create a unipolar world with China at the top, because the power that used to balance China out with the West, that is Russia, would then be a junior partner of China. And this is something the West does not understand in its relentless quest to continue the Ukraine conflict. The membership of the G20, you can all Google, but some of the more important countries there who are not in the present power structure, apart from India, includes Australia, Brazil, Canada. It also includes Indonesia, which holds the chair till 1st December. And of course, it also includes South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and the European Union as a group. Earlier, the G20 used to focus only on financial and social economic issues, but now it does much, much more. One of the most interesting parts of the G20 is that it focuses on the system of a G20 Sherpa. A G20 Sherpa is like the representative of the chairman. In this case, it would be Prime Minister Modi. And the Sherpa would work with other G20 Sherpas to work out a common agenda, to iron out difficulties, etc. The present G20 Sherpa appointed by our government is Amitabh Kant, who used to be till a short while ago the boss man of Niti, and he's just taken over a couple of months ago as our Sherpa for the G20. Now, the G20 also comes at a very crucial stage, the presidency, because the West is looking at a looming recession. They forgot when they imposed those unilateral sanctions on Russia that it's an interconnected world, and what harms Russia will come right back and harm them too. The rising prices of oil and commodities has on one hand hit the EU economy, which was just coming out of recession. It has tripled the prices of gas and heating at a time when a harsh winter is facing Europe. And it is therefore forcing even the most intractable European Union countries, and that includes Netherlands and Germany, to think about rolling back those sanctions. In fact, as of yesterday, the Netherlands has just announced that it will be rolling back most of the sanctions which it had imposed unilaterally upon Russia. And why is that so? Because, for instance, I'll give you an example. When I was in Netherlands as ambassador, the Dutch used to always say, oh, you Indians don't have heating in Delhi. You sleep with your sweater on and you go around in your house wearing 2 double sweaters and a jacket. But now what are they going to do? The temperature in public buildings in Netherlands has been brought down from 27 degrees to 14 degrees. And there is no heating anymore in their bathrooms. There is no heating inside their houses except a small amount at the coldest time of the night. So I'm afraid they're going to need not a double sweater, but much more to keep warm, because their winter is also much harsher than the North Indian winter, which means that reality, for the first time since the dolce vitae, as the Italians call it, the good life, they had a good life for a long time. Looking down on those who did not, their good life has come to an end at a time when India takes over the G20. What would be India's approach to the G20, therefore? As you know, we believe in Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which is the world is one family. And therefore, we would try to build a much more inclusive G20, where we would try to look at the common good of all. For instance, prices of commodities have gone up sharply because until the grain deal was worked out, then it almost collapsed and it's been reinstituted. What happened was that some parts of Africa are on the cusp of a devastating famine because they've had drought for 4 years. For instance, if you Google Ethiopia, etc. If the price of wheat goes up sharply, and if you recall, pressure was put on India when we held on to our wheat reserves, saying that we were selfish. The answer to that, which we gave, was that if Biden can say that America has to think of Americans, and the British can say that Britain has to think of the British, then what is wrong with India saying it has to think of Indians first? The same argument goes for buying crude Russian oil on the spot market at the cheapest rates and shoring up our reserves, for which somebody day before yesterday labeled our petroleum minister, Hardeep Puri, my colleague from Foreign Service, 2 years senior to me, saying that India does not have moral values in its foreign policy and in its energy policy. To which he responded, and I responded on Twitter, the only thing moral about a country's foreign policy is that it has to put in the forefront the core national interests of that country. That is what morality is all about. So, if it's good for another country to stock up its oil and gas, like Germany did with the Russian oil and gas until Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 was sabotaged, we don't know by whom, and there are two versions to that story. The Russians say that it was the Brits, and the West says it was the Russians. But the point is that until Russian gas dried up, they were also doing the same as we did. They were building up their reserves. And what is wrong with that? They were thinking about their citizens, just like we do for ours. So to come back then to the G20, we've also set up a G20 secretariat. The G20 secretariat is run by our former Foreign Secretary, Harsh Shringla, and this G20 secretariat will be responsible throughout the 1 year period of our presidency for all the activities of the G20, ending with this G20 summit, which we would have at the end of next year. That summit would be held in Pragati Maidan in Delhi, but there would be G20 meetings held all over India because our government is focused on the fact that we should not be North India centric in our foreign policy. And therefore, there has been a conscious effort made to have these important G20 side meetings all over India, including, I'm told, one in Hyderabad. The G20 is going to focus during India's presidency, as I told you, on inclusive growth and also on the environment, because all the various issues that we had agreed upon in the last climate change summit have been put in danger by the Ukraine conflict, by the unilateral sanctions, by the pandemic, by the global economy just coming out and then we hit by the Ukraine-Russia conflict, etc. We have to make sure that the priorities continue to remain, as Prime Minister Modi has said, on climate, digital, and health. These are the three priorities of the Indian G20 presidency, and it will continue as we've said. And the commitments that India has given, including of cutting down on our emissions and having a net zero economy by 2070, we have continued to reiterate that we would do our best to push for that commitment, firm commitment that we have given, despite the pandemic and all the challenges of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Let me then move to what we are actually following as our main challenges. One of the challenges that we are facing is that the decade of action, which focused on development, and I understand that many of you are studying developmental economics, etc., as your side papers, there had been a huge commitment to look at a full decade of action, which would continue for another 5 to 7 years. This has been completely set aside because of absence of liquidity and the developed countries trying to commit all their available resources to shoring up their gas and energy commitments, food supply chains, etc. Food supply chains is another very interesting issue on which the developed countries have taken a huge hit. And why is that so? Many developed countries used to lecture us as to why India is so set on self-sufficiency in food. Why do we have so much of food reserves? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? Well, I can tell you, before you were all born, we had a huge famine in India. I was just a kid. We needed food aid. The Americans sent us under the infamous PL 480 wheat that had been condemned for eating by American cattle. In other words, not you because you were born later, but I was fed wheat which was not fit for an American cow. I ate that wheat, I survived, and I'm standing before you today. That humiliation, which came soon after 1962, was a defining moment for India and our dignity as a nation. We decided that never again would India beg for food from anyone. When pressure was put on us to release our wheat reserves, we responded that the Ukraine-Russia conflict was not of our making. The Ukraine-Russia conflict was because the West had betrayed the pledges made to the Russian Federation when the Cold War came to an end, to the commitment made to Gorbachev that NATO would not expand eastwards, that the defining security line would end where it stood at that time when the Berlin Wall came down. But what NATO did thereafter was it expanded into the Baltic states, then into Poland. But Ukraine was different because those who are not students of Russian history don't understand that Ukraine as a nation is only 30 years old. Ukraine is Russian. The Black Sea is Russian. The Crimea is Russian. All the Russian novelists, poetries, everything from 10th century onwards centered around Russia. And why are the Ukrainians giving such a good fight? Why didn't Zelensky run away like Karzai? Because he comes from sound Russian stock. And Russians never run away. Ever. This is a country that can face martyrdom. This is a country that drove out Stalin. This is a country that defeated Napoleon. And therefore, it was a huge mistake for the West to imagine that they could scare Russia without ever intending to give that NATO membership, which is where the entire irony is that NATO never intended to give NATO membership to Zelensky, because if you look at the charter of NATO, Ukraine does not fulfill the requirements of being a NATO member, just like if you look at the Lisbon Treaty, on which I've written a huge book, the first one I wrote, Ukraine does not qualify for EU membership. This is just trying to pull the tail of a large, bad-tempered polar bear. Why do it? Why pull the tail of the polar bear when you know he has a bad temper? Why do it? Why do it when you know he has nuclear weapons? What an incredibly foolish thing to do. And that is what happened. And the brinkmanship was they would go this far and no further because at the end of the day, Putin will not cross. They calculated till the very end. Even when Zelensky was telling us, do not evacuate your 22,000 Indian medical students, do not evacuate. But the CIA was telling us, evacuate them immediately. Zelensky said, please don't worry, Putin will never invade. He himself did not expect Putin to invade. And that's how our 23,000 students got stuck in different parts of Ukraine and had to be evacuated. Unlike the Chinese, who just left their students there. We rescued Chinese students, we rescued Pakistani students, we rescued Bangladeshi students, we rescued all our students. But to come back then, to how this Ukraine-Russia conflict is going to be a huge challenge to our G20 presidency is because the G20 presidency comes at a time when some sections in the West are building up a negative narrative about India's position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. One of them, for instance, is the new German foreign minister, who belongs to the Greens party. And we've always had excellent relations with the German Greens. I remember when I was Joint Secretary Europe West and Joschka Fischer was the foreign minister, he was from the Greens party. We had an amazing relationship with him. But this lady who's become foreign minister for the first time, she rather fancies herself in what they like to call the sermonizing role, because they've forgotten that power has inexorably shifted from the west to the east, from Europe to Asia. But don't forget with what I told you, they still call the shots because the Bretton Woods institution's power structure is with them. The voting points of the Bretton Woods institution are with them. The P5 is with them. And we have to fight with 50, 60 countries so that we get a non-permanent seat for 2 years, every 22 years to get into the Security Council. The last time we got into the Security Council was 22 years ago, and our term will finish now in December, where we will chair the Security Council and go out for 20 years, 22 years, 18 years, who knows? So this negative narrative on India is based on extreme frustration. Why is India's GDP growing when the West has gone into recession? How is India managing its food supply chains? Why are we not affected if Ukrainian wheat does not come into our market, or corn, or sunflower oil, or the ingredients of toilet paper, which is now in very short supply in the European Union? Because the ingredients of toilet paper comes from Russia and Ukraine. It's gone up a bit, the cost of tissue paper, etc. But we make everything ourselves, so we can manage. And we are resilient people. I told you, no, that we ate grain condemned for American cattle, but nobody died. We have better digestive system than the American cattle, clearly, right? So we will come out of it. But their supply chains are affected because they moved very quickly from an agrarian economy to a completely service sector or industrialized economy, forgetting that at the end of the day, if there is a war and your food supply chains are affected, your people are affected, you will have revolution. You will not be able to stop it. Which is why, as a corollary to what is happening, you can see the extreme right coming to power all over Europe. This is the first time that a party associated with Mussolini has come to power in Italy. You have a far right government in the Czech Republic and Hungary. And you have an earthquake in that little island which abused us for 180 years, where in Delhi Gymkhana Club there used to be a notice under British times, no dogs and Indians permitted inside. And then I saw on social media Rishi Sunak with his dog sitting at his desk at 10 Downing Street. So from 1757, where no dogs and Indians were allowed, a dog, I don't know whether Indian or British, but certainly a dog with a man of Indian origin is sitting inside 10 Downing Street. So what does it tell you about the shift of power in the world? It tells you a lot, right? What else does it tell you? It tells you that the age of sermonizing is over. It tells you that under G20 presidency, we are going to make sure that international trade commitments are respected, and that if United Kingdom's Suella Braverman, whose grandparents went as indentured, and that is the subject of my book, they went as indentured to Mauritius, then as indentured to Kenya, and then went to the United Kingdom. But she says she's worried because Indians overstay on their visas, and she described migrants crossing the English Channel as an invasion of the United Kingdom. Well, I would tell Suella that those who deny their roots never have a good outcome. Suella's roots, those Indian roots, those indentured roots, is what enabled her grandparents to survive the most atrocious hardships in Mauritius and in Kenya, so that she, the grandchild, could make it good as the Interior Minister of the United Kingdom today. It was her Indian roots that saw her through. Because whatever she says at the end of the day, she's completely Indian. She's not even like Kamala Harris, who said that she's black, not Indian. Dad is black, mother is Indian, so she can say that. But Suella Braverman cannot say that. No, 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 no. She is 100% totally Indian origin person. So when that kind of power shift has taken place, what our G20 friends tell us is that when we take over the presidency on 1st of December this year, it's just coming up, perhaps we have finally a G20 president and a G20 country that could make both sides see sense, to make Biden understand in the first instance. Not only is it dangerous to keep on pulling the tail of an enraged polar bear with nuclear weapons, but it is foolish to do so, because if he goes down, the dragon will come up and the American eagle will be in danger. That's the first thing Biden needs to understand. And the second is for Biden to understand that his unilateral sanctions have not affected the Americans like the EU, because the Americans have excellent alternative sources of renewable energy, shale oil, etc., etc. The West doesn't have it. The West, for decades, had committed their economies to cheap supply of oil and gas flowing through Nord 1 and Nord 2, flowing, I still remember, through a place in Netherlands called Gronenberg, from where the gas comes in. They had shut down their nuclear power stations. They were moving to clean energy, and it was all premised on Russian oil and gas. And therefore, the unilateral sanctions that they enthusiastically followed, like a pack of enthusiastic pet dogs following the master, which is exactly what the EU and the Americans are. It's really a pet dog master relationship. They have now understood is going to bring down their political systems, because the people don't want it. The people don't want the Ukraine war to continue because it's affecting their dolce vitae, their good life. It's actually finishing off their dolce vitae. So under those circumstances, when you read that why should Modi do that? Because Putin is losing. Putin too should reflect that the reverses he's taken on the battlefield are reverses because Russians are fighting Russians. Those Ukrainians were Russians. They're fighting bravely and well, unlike Karzai and his cowardly pack of Afghans who ran away, leaving the poor Afghans betrayed and clinging onto the wheels of the 747, taking off for the safety of Western capitals. That was the most awful sight that I have seen in my life on my TV screen. But the Ukrainians didn't do that. They fought back because they have Russian blood in them. And at the end of the day, what is the point of Putin, brother fighting brother? Identical history, language, culture, civilization, literature, poetry, everything the same. Why make enemies of your own brothers? Even though I'm conscious of the fact that we've done the same. But that was because of the British. We didn't start it. But it's Putin who started it. So Putin should understand that in the Russian elite, there is now huge misgiving. And Putin likes to read Kipling's Jungle Book. Now, in Kipling's Jungle Book, it has been said that when the leader of the pack misses his kill, he is called a dead wolf for as long as he is alive, which is not for very long. I think that is the most appropriate statement by Kipling, who otherwise was a neoconservative pro-colonialist whom I detest. But he said the right thing. When the leader of the pack misses a kill, he's a dead wolf for the short time that he's alive. And Putin has to understand that the reverses by the Russians demonstrates that the Russian economy is not in good shape. The Russian forces are not committed to winning. Maybe because they don't like brother fighting brother. Maybe because they are ill prepared. Or maybe because he didn't use his first class nuclear ready forces first, thinking these are like small ants. Why use an elephant to kill an ant? But the ant turned out to have much greater resilience. So now what would Putin do? And that brings me back to India and the G20. What can India do? India is uniquely situated to talk sense to the Americans, to talk sense to Putin, we already have, and to talk sense to Zelensky. And to make Zelensky understand from Putin, not from us, that the public opinion in the West has definitively shifted against more military aid. And there is no way Zelensky can continue to make gains against the Russians without monthly $1 billion aid flowing in. Where is the money going to come from? And afterwards, who is going to rebuild Ukraine, which is 50% destroyed? Where is the Marshall Plan for Ukraine? Who's funding it? This is not World War II at all. And then when they say that Putin will not use a short-range tactical nuclear weapon, there is now very worrying talk coming from US intelligence that Zelensky is planning to use a small dirty bomb and blame it on the Russians. Now, a dirty bomb, as you probably all know, being budding engineers, is a bomb that detonates small amounts of radioactive matter. It can be built by a non-nuclear weapon state. It can be done. Its radiation can spread if the wind direction is good. It can be hugely devastating. So I'm going to end here because I want to keep 20-25 minutes of question and answers. And I'm going to end with a quote, not from Kipling, whom I detest, but the Rig Veda, which I love, which is my own. The Rig Veda said, and this is my thought for India's G20 presidency, may the stream of my life flow into the river of righteousness. Loose the bonds of sin that bind me. Let not the thread of my song be cut while I sing, and let not my work end before its fulfillment. It sounds much better in Sanskrit, but I think it sounds good in any language. And with that, I will conclude and take questions and answers. Thank you. For questions and answers, I don't dare to move from here because the mic is working. Can someone give me paper and pencil, please? Or can I move this there? Will it work there? No. I think it's working beautifully here. I'll keep standing here. Can someone give me a paper and pencil and I can do it from here? Thank you so much. This is working perfectly. Thank you. You need this. I have this. Thank you. So I have 15 minutes. So you're most welcome to ask questions related to the topic or around the topic. And I'll answer them maybe 3 at a time. And if there are no questions, it means that you're so convinced by what I've said that you have no questions to ask. So it's entirely up to you. Right? I see somebody right at the back of the room. Yeah, please give your name and. Okay.
So the points that are in favor of America not like willing to stop this war are very clear. It's getting to provide safe to its defense industry. It's getting to destroy restrictions without ever influencing its own soldiers. But what are the points that are in, that motivates America to end this war between Russia and Ukraine?
What are the points which would motivate US to end the war? Okay. I'll take another question. Yes, please, from the front. What's your name, dear?
Tapishi.
Okay.
I'm third year MNC. My question is, you said if Russia falls down, China will rise.
Yes.
But where does India stand in all this? Where does our economy stand in this? If US is in recession, if the West is in recession, and China will come up, so what does India have in all this?
One more question. Somebody from there, yes.
How we are in this power to stop the rise of China, which is in some ways
To stop the conflict.
the rise of China is like China itself is one of the G20 nations, and we have economic and defense in its conflicts in it. So, what's the policy India taking towards that?
Right. So let me answer the questions in the order they were asked. The first question was very logical. What could motivate US to end the war? The first motivational factor is nothing to do with G20. It's the midterm congressional elections, which the Democrats are going to lose to the Republicans big time. That electoral reverse will force Biden to be more flexible because the Republicans do not want to continue funding the Ukraine conflict. That's the first result, direct result of the reverses that are going to face the Democrats in these midterms. Secondly, if public opinion shifts as it is shifting in the United States to not aiding the Ukrainians because the American economy is getting affected badly, then Biden will be forced to shift course because Biden does not want Kamala Harris to become president, and he has delusions of a second term. Now, that is delusional. I agree with all of you who are laughing. But Biden fancies himself as second term as president. So, this is the man who, when he was congratulating Rishi Sunak, called him by a Muslim name, I think. What was it? Rashid Sunak. He said, I would like to congratulate Rashid Sunak for becoming Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. This is just a few days ago. I heard him. So this would be the natural check. What India could do is to use our special strategic partnership with the Americans to explain to them that since the Americans agree with us that the rise of a militaristic, aggressive, nuclear China bent on taking over Taiwan by force represents the biggest threat to international peace and security since World War II, it is in America's interest to push for an end to this Ukraine conflict, which is not taking the world anywhere, and to refocus on China's rise. So this is all that we can do, but it's quite a lot. The second question is, that if Russia is eclipsed and China rises, what will happen to us? Well, that's a very good question. And in fact, it's quite amazing that a 99-year-old man, yes, he's 99 now, Henry Kissinger, who again is not a favorite of mine, he said as recently as 2 months ago, and you can Google it, he said, the question will now be how to end this war. At its end, a place has to be found for Ukraine and a place has to be found for Russia if we do not want Russia to become an outpost of China in Europe. And that is the crux of the issue. That Russia is a great European power which straddles Europe and Asia. It is of huge strategic value to China, but it has always been Russia that has been the senior partner. But you can already see, with the visible weakening of the Russian position in Ukraine, that Xi Jinping is looking more and more cheerful day by day. And what happens to us is that we face a greatly weakened Russia on whom we are dependent on spare parts for our aging weapon supply systems, for which we are finding substitutes, but it takes time. And a greatly reinvigorated China under its new dictatorial regime, Xi Jinping, who is now crowned emperor for life, who, after eyeing Taiwan, will be looking to further his territorial gains in Galwan. And don't forget that the Galwan clip was played in the CCP Congress, which anointed Xi Jinping. And the Chinese commander whom we injured was given a medal at that same party Congress. So just like India did not forget 62, the Chinese have not forgotten Galwan. Or the fact that the India that faced up to the Chinese in Galwan is not the India of 1962. So it's not a good situation for us at all if Russia collapses. The third one is about China's rise. What was exactly the question, or was it a comment? You asked me the question, no? You are the dynamics. The dynamics is not a problem because the Ukraine-Russia conflict, while making Russia weaker, has also damaged China's economy because of its zero COVID policy, because of the fact that because of its support to Russia, the West has in a way tried to divert trade from China to India. Because of its threats to Taiwan, semiconductor industries are being built in other countries, including in India, because who controls semiconductors can control victory or defeat in the next world war. There's no doubt about it. So within the G20, if we try to work to bring the war to an end, I don't see the Chinese opposing it. Not at all. The Chinese probably are suing for a temporary peace. Otherwise, why on earth should Xi Jinping send us a condolence message when that famous footbridge in Gujarat collapsed? At first, I thought maybe he's being sarcastic, but then I read the message. To me, it seemed quite genuine. In English, translated from Chinese, the condolence message was because PM Modi is from Gujarat It's a very big tragedy. It was a message from a neighbor who's been very nasty to us, not trying to kiss and make up, that would be too much, but trying to put a friendly dragon's claw into the elephant's hand. That's the way I would put it. And as I wrote in a recent article, that because an elephant cannot dance with a dragon, we have to keep a distance between the dragon and the elephant, safe distance, so that one doesn't come so close to the other as to cause a conflict. And I suspect that in the G20, we would do that. I have time for only two more questions. Yes, please. Okay.
Recently, our defense minister made a comment regarding POK that Indian force is ready to capture the POK. But I want to know, in such a complex world where every power is trying to dominate other, every superpower is trying to dominate other, how they will respond to such a move by India?
Okay. Last question. Yes, please. Okay, I'll take two. I'll take yours and his. Yeah. Can you speak up, please? Yeah.
But Russia seems increasing the economy of Russia is back stronger than it was in February before the invasion. And on Israel, it looks more stronger. So, how Russia, it seems it's become stronger.
Okay, I'll answer your question. Last question, please. Okay.
Even 70% of our defense is of Russian army. So now we can see that Russia itself is involved in a war. So how can it affect our defense? These different conflicts, China and policy.
Okay.
Even the 1962, no one came for our rescue because Russia was at that point in time it was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now Russia is involved in a war with Ukraine. So if something happens against China, will they come for our rescue? How will
Okay, I get it. So the first question was about POK. Rajnath Singh, our Raksha Mantri, made that comment because India lost POK because of the foolishness of its leadership, who were very naive. The first mistake we made was we asked Mountbatten to stay on when we had become independent. In no other country in the world could such a foolish decision have been taken. And because Mountbatten stayed on, he stopped the Indian government, the Free Indian government, from quickly moving its armed forces to stop POK from being taken over. And had Sardar Patel not been there, we would have lost the whole of the valley. That was a greater blunder than 1962. And if people who are descendants of that family don't like it, I'm sorry. But history is testimony that when you have been devoured, raped, partitioned, left bleeding, do you ask the representative of that government to stay on as your benefactor? Will he be your benefactor? When he has raped you, partitioned you, impoverished you, left you at 20% literacy and mortality rates, and built an independent state next door out of your own territory to ensure that you will never rise from the ashes. When the former Prime Minister Winston Churchill said that India does not have leadership to be free, it is going to collapse in 5 years' time. That's what he said. And what did he get for it? The Nobel Prize for Literature. Please don't forget. Huh? He is the only Nobel Prize for Literature which has been given without writing a book. He was given Nobel Prize for Literature for all the nasty things he wrote about Indians. That's why he got the Nobel Prize. So when Rajnath Singh says that, let me tell you that the day we are ready to go into POK, we will take POK. And no power can stop us because it's our territory. There is a resolution in the Indian Parliament that says There will be no permanent peace with Pakistan until POK comes back to India. Okay? No power is going to stop us. You know why? Because unlike Ukraine, we are a nuclear weapon state. Nobody can stop us. We're just waiting for the right moment. We will take back POK. All right? The second question was about the Russian economy. The Russian economy has done well in some respects because of the extra oil that it sold to India and to China, etc. But there has been a great brain drain from Russia. Young people have gone to neighboring countries. The Russian elite is uneasy. And Russians, in general, don't want to butcher Ukrainians. They look too much like Russians. It's very uncomfortable. So therefore, I would say, both economically and politically, it would not be difficult if Biden would be reasonable to find a negotiated end to the conflict. As far as being dependent on Russia is concerned, I'd like to tell the young man who asked me this question to go back and read the history of India from 49 onwards. What happened? As I said, India was left bleeding and partitioned with no one to help us. The World Bank told us, don't set up institutes of higher education because you can't afford it. Those who want to have higher education, they can be sent to UK. Just give Indians primary education and a few secondary education, no tertiary education. That was the plans of the World Bank for us, India, in 1948, 49, 50, 51, 52. You said nobody came to our aid. Actually, the Americans were supposed to give us a nuclear umbrella before 62. It was not the Russians who let us down. It was President Kennedy and his predecessor. They had said that if China attacks India, United States will provide a nuclear umbrella. Nobody provided anything. But it wasn't such a big defeat as we were led to believe. If you read the records, the Indian army fought back without equipment, cold and freezing. We gave it right back. You are asking, who will come to our aid if China attacks again? My answer to you is, after 62, India expects no one to come to its aid. We are India. We don't need anyone anymore. We will defeat the Chinese on our territory and beat them until they leave our territory. We don't want anyone. We don't need anyone. We don't want anyone. We are India. In 62, when we needed, because we were promised, we got nothing. We lost POK because of Mountbatten and the foolishness of the Indian leadership. Do you think that such a country, which was forced to eat PL 480, which lost in 62, which was not given a nuclear umbrella, which lost POK, you think we now have any expectations from anybody? No, 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 no. Please don't ever think that. You're a young man. You're a proud Indian. Remember, we have traveled a long way. I told you, no, from 1757 to having an Indian and his dog in 10 Downing Street. If we can put an Indian and a dog in 10 Downing Street, we don't need anybody's help. Not at all. I'm going to conclude this lecture by asking you all to stand up and sing the national anthem with me. जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण Jaya Hai, Jaya Hai, Jaya Jaya Jaya. Bharat Mata ki Jai. Thank you. এটা একটু বার করে দেবেন? হ্যাঁ, got it. Yeah. I hope I managed with your mic. Better listen.
So if you have any questions, you can write to me. Maybe I can forward to madam. Okay. Thank you.